Welcome, everybody. It's the Wednesday edition of Talkback, brought to you by the Mustard Seed Restaurant. Office solutions and services. Locally owned solutions for every office. Bitterroot Motors, doing it right for more than 42 years. Automotive Cutting Edge at 1510 Bulwer, offering great auto repair, 542-2218. Transport Equipment, your headquarters for RV service maintenance and repair. Call 541-9097. Rogers & Company Fine Jewelry, offering beautiful, unique fine jewelry at competitive prices across from Super Walmart. And by Deep Roots Medicinals, offering alternative and natural medicine to treat a wide variety of conditions. Call 531-7461. Okay, we already have a house full of people. Good morning, John King.
Hey, good morning, Peter.
And you brought a special guest in with you this morning?
That's right. Dominique, who will be filling in for me next week. She's our intern here at KGVO Studios, our palatial mansion. And you've been enjoying the peeled grapes, I'm sure, Dominique.
Yes, it's been fun.
How are you? You're not nervous, are you?
No, I'm not nervous.
Good. Well, neither am I. So, but we have a special guest waiting for us on the phone. Anthony Variano is joining us from Glendive. And Anthony, first of all, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Peter.
You bet. Hey, listen, tell us a little about you. You are leading an effort. You've already submitted, I understand, a petition to the Secretary of State to place on the ballot an initiative, basically, to make recreational marijuana available in Montana as it is in Colorado. Is that the gist?
That's exactly correct. It's called Initiative 7. It's basically the Colorado amendment tailored for the state of Montana, and all the tax monies that are accumulated would go into the public school fund.
So how has this worked out in Colorado? I'm sure you've run the numbers and you're using it in your sales pitch. So tell people in Missoula that might support or even oppose this particular initiative why it's a good thing for Montana.
In Colorado, they actually were obliged to give taxpayers a refund because they brought in so much in taxes. I believe the first $42 million was supposed to go towards school construction. They brought in over $60 million in taxes. So I think every taxpayer in Colorado got like a $7 refund sent to their house.
So Missoula doesn't need to pass a bond. It needs a blunt.
That's right.
Or to pass a bong, as the case may be.
Much better joke.
Well, now, Anthony, why Montana? See, Montana already has a medical marijuana law. Why do we need to pass this for recreational marijuana as well?
The medical marijuana law doesn't raise any tax revenue for the state. Legalizing it recreationally will also give us an advantage when it comes to tourism. We have one of the most beautiful states in the nation, and I think even more and more people would come out and visit us if marijuana were legalized and available recreationally.
So how are you trying to now I understand, and this is probably an important thing we kind of skipped over, that this is a constitutional change, right?
Yes.
So how many signatures do you need to gather to get this thing through?
Almost 50,000.
50,000 signatures.
And how long will you have to do it, Anthony?
I think the deadline is June 17th of next year.
Okay, so you have a full year, just about.
Yep.
So that's 4 times the number of people that show up at Bernie Sanders rallies. That's a lot of people.
So no. Where do you plan to begin? Are you going to start in Missoula? Because that would make sense. Because I think there are probably more people in Missoula to support what you're doing than almost any other city in Montana.
Well, I would agree with you there. I have a great network that's been growing ever since yesterday throughout the state of people who have said they'd be willing to collect signatures. I've raised over $1,500 in the last 24 hours. I've added over 100 members to my Facebook group, Cycling for Sensible Drug Policy. I've received emails from plenty of people who've offered places to stay, organizing efforts, and even cash. So the response has been immense and overwhelming. It's just been absolutely amazing. I really didn't expect people to respond in this fashion. So it's all a surprise to me.
Let me ask you this. Right now, the current policy from the federal government is basically play nice with the various states and their drug laws. but it's still on the books as an illegal substance at the federal level.
It's a Schedule I drug, yeah.
Are you worried that a different administration might take a different tack at dealing with states that have marijuana independence, I guess we could call it?
I'm not worried about it because recently the Senate Appropriations Committee voted 21-9 to protect state medical marijuana laws from federal interference, limiting the Department of Justice and Drug Enforcement Administration's funds with regards to marijuana laws. So, the policy is changing. John Tester's bill to protect industrial hemp in the United States also passed the Senate Appropriations Committee. The public opinion and the opinion of our legislatures at the state and federal level, I think, is changing. We have a better chance of legalizing it in 2016 when there's a presidential election rather than in a midterm year.
Now, Anthony, you are, of course, I'm sure you're aware of what happened several years ago when medical marijuana was legalized, and there was a medical marijuana store on almost every street corner. I know there was in Missoula. And then all of a sudden, they had these big black Suburbans come rolling into town, and all raids, people arrested. One person here in Missoula spent like a couple of years in jail, and then the legislature got involved and severely restricted the use of medical marijuana. Is there some reason why? I realize you just kind of explained this a little bit, but is there any reason why you think that wouldn't happen again?
If you look to the future, Bernie Sanders, a socialist, could very well end up being the Democratic nomination for president. And if that's the way this country is moving public opinion-wise, I think it's an opportune time to legalize marijuana in the state of Montana.
You think Bernie Sanders is going to win the primary?
I think he's got a pretty darn good chance, yes.
I think you've had too much marijuana today. But we'll talk about that after the break.
Yeah, we do have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Anthony Variano is joining us. If you have a question or a comment, agree or disagree, maybe you're on board with this. You think it's a great it's an idea whose time has come.
Yeah, I know this is Missoula. I know there are passionate supporters of this initiative out there. Give us a call. Support Anthony in his pursuit of this initiative. 721-1290 is the number.
All right, we'll be right back. Oh, yeah. 721-1290 is the number. This is Talkback, and we have two lines open. Joining us on the phone right now, Anthony Variano is visiting with us from Glendive, and we're talking about legalizing recreational marijuana, making Montana much like it is in Colorado. So far, we've heard the good news about tax revenues, helping schools. Now, see, it's interesting you would say that, Anthony, because I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but here in Missoula, we have an upcoming levy that is being sent to our taxpayers here, about 70 to 80,000 taxpayers in Missoula City and County. They're asking for $158 million to rebuild or remodel like 10 or 11 public schools. And a lot of folks are feeling very nervous about that. Do you feel that what you are doing would help to ameliorate that problem a little bit?
That's the idea. We are also going through something similar over here in Glendive. We're looking to build a new school, and the bonds aren't looking too good to a lot of city officials, and people are wondering where the money's going to come from. This is just one opportunity to come up with the funds for constructing schools in Montana.
Now, Anthony, for those of us who don't smoke, I don't smoke, and of course I don't use marijuana. So help me out a little bit on how this would work on a street level, basically. How much will it be taxed? Do you buy a pack of marijuana? I don't understand how you do this. Do you buy it by the baggie or by the cigarette? Forgive me. You're talking.
It comes in a Pez dispenser, Peter.
You know what I mean. I'm a complete ignoramus, and I'm asking seriously. I'm not being facetious here. So how would this work? Seriously.
Well, in Colorado and Washington, they generally sell marijuana by the gram. Unless it's in edibles, then you're selling by the milligram. Usually an edible is around 5 milligrams. So cookie or one of those, like a sucker, would be about 5 milligrams of THC, the active ingredient in marijuana that gets you high. So they also sell them in containers that are child safe, obviously. And then they also put them in a bag that is child safe. So they do their best to make sure that children don't get into it. Generally, in Colorado, the prices are a little lower just because the market has developed a little bit better. Washington started a little later. You can get 3.5 grams, which is an eighth of marijuana, for about $40, including tax, in Colorado. They're taxing at 25%.
Now, if you're putting THC in suckers and cookies, how are they child safe again?
They put them in a child-safe bag that locks.
Okay, so it's got like a code on it or something you put in?
Yeah, everything you buy has to come with a bag. Sometimes they'll charge you $1 fee just for the bag because the bags are expensive. But yeah, the idea is the child can't get into the bag.
So it sounds like you have a niche market of people who could make these bags.
Honestly, I want to put my 2-year-old in a room with one of these suckers, or a dupe, in a bag and see if he can get in there, because I've seen him get into some pretty crazy places. So when it comes to, I think you've got a good point. I think there would be a huge windfall of revenue for the state because not a lot of states have marijuana legalized yet. We'd be an early adopter to this sort of policy, but the other problem is that the other two adopters are nearby neighbors. I guess what I want to ask from you, do you see any downsides to this policy?
No.
No downsides at all?
None whatsoever. You'll empty the jails of nonviolent offenders. You'll save taxpayers money. You'll raise tax revenue. You'll improve the public education system in the state, which is second to last in teacher quality in the nation, 49th in teacher quality. We can't pay our teachers a living wage, so our youth has to suffer. I don't think that's the way I want to go through life in Montana.
Do you see a downside, Peter? You seem like you do see a downside.
I'm shaking my head because, see, Anthony, I will be very honest with you. I'm the old guy in the room, okay? I'm of that generation that thinks that alcohol is bad enough, that we have one of the worst rates of alcoholism in the country, and so you want to add yet another intoxicant to the things that we can, smoke, shoot, rub into our bellies, or drink, or whatever, and legalize it. And I realize, the revenues probably would be good and all that, but I'm wondering about how many more people are we going to kill on the highways? How many? You know what I mean? It's just.
Actually, Peter, research by D. Mark Anderson at Montana State University has basically proven that marijuana is a substitute for alcohol. So generally, users of alcohol won't be compounding or.
I think you would find a lot of highway patrol troopers who would dispute you on that.
They've also done research that says that people who are stoned drive safer than people who are sober.
Oh, come on! Really? Come on!
Serious. I am absolutely.
Is that because they're driving slower because they know they're stoned?
Yeah, well, they're much more aware of their inebriated state, so they always buckle their seatbelt. They always go under the speed limit. They pump the brakes. It's amazing.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. We have a caller who wants to visit with you, so let's get our callers going here. Brenda, good morning. You're on with Anthony. Hi.
Good morning. I just wanted to pass on a comment that I had from my adult granddaughter when I was discussing the idea of marijuana use with her. Right. And my comment was, the worst thing about it is I think it's a gateway to the bad drugs. And she said, no, Grandma, alcohol is the gateway to the bad drugs. You get a snoot full of whatever booze, and then somebody offers you something, and you say, sure, give me some of that bleep. And that was her comment. She hasn't necessarily convinced me, and I'm not going to say that I would love to have everybody have free access to it, but I do think that for medical use, I've known of several cancer patients that have used it, and it has been a great thing for them, but they can already get that now if they have a medical license.
Okay.
So that's just what I wanted to say, is that maybe it isn't a gateway, who knows.
Okay. Well, thanks, Brenda. So how do you respond to that, Anthony?
I would say her granddaughter's very well informed.
Okay, well, we have another comment. Let's get Mike on the line. Mike, you're on with Anthony. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Today's genetically engineered, modified Frankenstein marijuana takes otherwise energetic, imaginative innovative young people and turns them into zombies. They sit all day on the couch watching old TV reruns, eating Doritos.
Heck, that's me. That's what I do. And I don't even take drugs.
He's right. You're right about the TV shows and Doritos.
Sorry. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
But the tax revenue portion, do we really want another way for government to expand more rules, more laws, more regulations, all on the backs of stoners who can least afford it? And we're going to create a whole new generation of young people who have watched their 20s and 30s disappear, and they're going to wake up in their 50s wondering out of their drug haze, and they're going to wonder why they don't have the car or the house that their neighbor has, that stayed clean, that stayed sober, that innovated, that worked hard, that didn't sit on the couch all day watching reruns. So we're it's just a built-in tool to create a whole new generation of dependency. So that's my comment.
All right, thanks for the call. And Anthony, we're going to have you respond to Mike's comment. We have a quick break. We'll come right back. And we have, there they go. The lines are lighting up. 721-1290. Get it? Lighting up. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Talk Back, and we are rapidly running out of time. We have Anthony on the phone with us right now talking about his proposal to put recreational marijuana on the ballot. We still have lots of folks that want to visit with you. Sue, you're on with Anthony. Go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to tell Anthony that I spent a little time in his fair city last month, and Glendive is a very nice community full of really wonderful people.
Well, what do you think about his initiative, Sue?
Well, I wanted to refute what he said about people that are on marijuana driving more carefully. I had a very personal experience with this recently, not myself, but someone I love dearly, was pulled over for driving while they were high, and showed that person a video of their driving, and they were all over the road, and it was not a very pleasant experience, and I just wanted to say that I totally agree that marijuana should be legalized, because I think it would provide a lot of money for the schools. But I don't agree about the driving, being more careful when you drive, because it obviously wasn't the case in this instance.
Sue, I want to get one more call in, okay? Thanks for your input. Appreciate that. Mary, you're on with Anthony. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I am in total agreement with this. I've always thought that it would be a good idea to legalize it. That way we can use the tax revenues and such to improve things as our schools and our roads and other various things that needed to be funded.
Okay.
Also, if people are going to do this, regardless if it's legal or illegal, and I just think making it legal would be just far better in the long run for everybody involved to be able to make a better life around our communities for us.
Okay, great, Mary.
And I think it also helps decrease the crime element.
Okay, thanks for your call, Mary. So, Anthony, we have exactly 1 minute. So, wrap up for us if you would. Looks like you got some support here in Missoula, obviously. So, how can folks get in touch with you and get more about your petition?
They can find out more from the Facebook group, Cycling for Sensible Drug Policy. I'll also be posting updates on GoGonzoJournal.com. There should be a 1,600-mile bike tour of Montana taking place, and if they would like to take part in that, they can get in touch with me by emailing gogonzojournal@gmail.com. Also, I have a GoFundMe account, gofund.me/GoGonzoJournal. We've raised $1,500, like I said, in 24 hours, and we hope to raise more so we can fund signature gathering across the state.
Right. We'll link all that to our Facebook page, okay?
All right.
Great. Thanks. Anthony, thank you so much. We'll look to have you on again to see how the progress is going, okay?
Yeah, when you bike through, come here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Will do.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay. Hey, we're up against a break, and we're going to talk, shift gears and talk political science and primaries when we come back. Welcome back, everyone. It's hour number 2 of Talkback, brought to you by Deep Roots Medicinals, Rogers & Company Fine Jewelry, Bitterroot Motors, Office Solutions and Services, the Mustard Seed Restaurant, Automotive Cutting Edge, and by Transport Equipment. Okay, we are back, and we are shifting gears and changing tack, I guess the best way to put it. I was going to try to put up some clever marijuana pun, but I couldn't think one. So anyway.
We're passing the bong.
Yeah. As you wish. I'm wondering, people just turning, what the heck are they talking about? All right. So, John King, please introduce our guest. We're going to talk about some politics. We love politics.
That's
here.
right. We've got political science professor Chris Muste over from the University of Montana. We had him on before to talk about domestic politics and what's going on with the primaries and who's most likely to win. But I want to just take a step back and instead of talking about current politics and what's hot right now and what Hillary said in her big interview, which I do really want to talk about. But I want to take a step back from that and get a grip on what America's primary system is all about, how it works, and why the heck it's so confusing. Because it is, I mean, if you're into games or if you're into studying politics or anything, it's a complicated system. And it's not delineated in the Constitution. It's very interesting. And so I asked Chris to come in and basically teach us what the heck is going on.
We have a primer right here. Go ahead.
Well, John, Peter, thanks for having me back. Really enjoy being here. I guess the short answer to your question, John, is contrary to popular belief, it's not an effort to create employment for political scientists to try to explain this to other people.
Okay.
But it looks that complicated. As you say, it's not in the Constitution. Political parties themselves aren't even mentioned in the Constitution. So essentially how the primary system has come to pass is a combination of the growth of parties in the 1800s to become sort of modern, effective machines for trying to mobilize voters and select candidates. And then in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the progressive era reformers trying to say, well, we don't like these party bosses having so much power, whether it's the Tammany bosses in New York or I grew up in Ohio, there were rural bosses and rural machines in Ohio. So the reformers said, let's try to put this more in the hands of the people. And so starting in the 1900s, more primaries became the way that parties nominated their candidates. And this really accelerated after the 1968 elections where and frankly, 68 elections where both parties had real controversies in their nomination process.
The whole world is watching. The whole world is watching, right.
Exactly.
Chicago 7, all that good stuff.
Chicago, Miami, very controversial. And so the parties essentially opened this up even further. So there's a tension here between what the parties want, what candidates want, what voters want, and the state and federal governments are sort of referees in this whole thing.
So the way you explained it, sorry, it sounds very late. 1968 was where it kind of reached its full stride.
Right.
So where was the first primary and why did it come about? Oh, yes, I asked him a question he doesn't know.
I'm stumped. I'm not a historian. I'm a political scientist. But probably in the late 1800s, well, I would think actually, in the late 1800s when a bunch of really wild and crazy territories like Montana and Wyoming became states. And
wait, if Montana had the very first primary, you need to know this.
I do, but I don't think that's the case. Probably some reformer on one of the coasts did it first, or maybe a Midwestern reformer. But Montana and Wyoming were early in giving the vote to women. Mm-hmm. And so, that was part of this general progressive era set of reforms. And so that primaries might have come into one of those states that had a heavy progressive / reformist element in the early 1900s.
All right, looks like we have a caller, right?
We do. As a matter of fact, he's been waiting since the top of the hour. Evidently really wants to talk about primaries. Harlan, you're on with Chris Muste. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I was kind of hoping that this conversation was going to move in the direction of the primary that's being held in Missoula because there's some controversy going on. So I was hoping he could.
Was that the city council primary?
That's it.
Okay.
So Ward 2, which I happen to be part of, one of the candidates, and there's some going back and forth between the county elections administrator, secretary of state, county attorney, city attorney, and I'm trying to figure out, make heads or tail of how this nonpartisan primary law is written in Montana. So I was hoping that the professor could elaborate on that.
Well, the way I understand it, forgive me for jumping in here, but the way I understand it is you have to have 4 people to have a primary, and Ward 2 of the 6 wards is the only one with 4 candidates. right?
It's a top 2 primary runoff, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so the question that's coming up between the elections administrator and Secretary of State's office is how many wards need to be above that to trigger, or actually the way it's worded is, when can they cancel the primary to save money? So right now, that's where the discussion's going back and forth.
Well, it would seem to me to be a very inexpensive primary because it's only one ward, right?
Apparently, it's very expensive to put one line of ink on these ballots.
Okay.
Well, the way the law is, if you have one, it will trigger Ward 6 too, so you'll have to have 2.
Wow. That's weird.
Wait, what? Why would you have to have 2? I'm sorry. Explain that again.
So if you follow, it's the Montana Code is Montana Code 13-14-115. All
right, I'm looking it up right now. 13-14-115.
115. Okay.
So there's some questions about how many wards need to be, or how many offices on the ballot need to be 4 or more, and that it's pretty clear if there's more than one office, 50% of them have to be 4 or more. But if you read further down in the law, past Section 2, there's a section that says if you do a primary, it shall be done with all that are more than 2. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me.
And there is one that has 3. Ward 6 has 3, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So, but we look back at when the mayor was elected, in his last election, they had 4 running there.
Right.
And they were more than happy to skip it to not dilute his vote. But when you have somebody who self-identifies as a fiscal conservative, as myself, against 3 liberals, they want a primary real bad.
The plot thickens.
The plot thickens. So in a general election, Adam Hertz won last time with 3 votes. There was less than 1,000 votes.
I was there. I was there for that recount with Cynthia Wolkin. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. So Ward 2 is going to be very close to begin with, especially with Adam Hertz supporting me. So and this is, you can't prove this, but it looks an awful lot like the Missoula Democrats and liberals are trying real hard to get a primary so that in a general, if I make it through, I'm only running against one other liberal and the vote will be closer.
Huh.
But let me just ask a question. I love this. A political scientist, I get to ask you a question. If the Montana Code,
can you hang on to that?
I think I can.
I just looked at my clock. And Harlan, can you hang on for a minute?
We know Harlan's patient because he waited 10 minutes to get his question.
Exactly. Can you do you have time to hang on?
Yeah, I'm driving to a job site, so I can hang on.
Okay, hang on. We'll take a quick break. I really want to. This is fascinating, and we'll be right back. Hey, we're back on Talkback, and a real live political discussion going on here. And this isn't theoretical. This is actually going on right now. We're talking with Harlan. Harlan, what's your last name?
Wells.
Harlan Wells. You're on the ballot. As far as we know right now, it's going to be a primary ballot.
Does your middle name start with G?
G, it does not, but my dad does, and he goes by H.G. Wells.
Okay. Sorry, had to throw that in.
Okay, now the whole idea here is, according to, you guys have been kicking this around a little bit, looking at the statute. So, Chris, what have you discovered by looking at the statute?
It's a little murky.
Clear as mud, right?
Well, I'd say it's clearer than mud.
Okay.
But one of the things that it is clear about it is it seems to give some leeway to the elections administrator.
Okay.
It says there's some language in there about under these conditions the election administrator may decide not to have a primary. So there's not a clear directive to what actually has to happen under certain conditions. So it gives a lot of leeway there.
So that's to the election administrator, which would be in Missoula, I believe, Rebecca Connors. But during the break, Harlan pointed out that he thinks city council has sway over this.
Correct. In the end, whatever she recommends, the city council can still vote to have a primary within 10 days, which would be Monday the 13th. So, but they're on hold right now, waiting for direction and interpretation of the law. Because they want to try and follow the law the best they can, but it will really come down to what Rebecca Connors, who was appointed in 2014, to what she decides. And this is actually one of the big arguments they had for not making it an appointed position,
but make it an elected position.
Well, if you remember, Vicki Zier was the clerk and recorder and elections supervisor, and she was elected.
Yeah, and then the county commissioners decided they wanted it an appointed position, and the pushback at the time was, suppose she does something that people don't like, she's no longer responsible to the voter. Well, if she decides that there is going to be a primary for what I argue is political reasons to reduce the dilution of the vote, then this is exactly what people were afraid of, that we now have an appointed elections commissioner by 3 Democrats who are favoring in an elected decision, or in a decision on an election, that will make it harder for a conservative to get elected.
I think you have a really good case. I mean, there's not like. What do you think? Because I can see a machine working this way for its own benefit.
Right. Well, I think part of the problem is not just that she's not democratically accountable because she's not in an elected office, but there's this discretion that the law clearly states that the administrator has, regardless of whether the administrator is appointed or elected. And so, I mean, I don't know the dynamics of this, but I think to some extent it may speak positively to what she's trying to do. If she's going to the city council to trying to get feedback or advice on this, I think that may be a positive step. It's obviously a city council meeting, if it's a full meeting, is an open forum where people can express their views. So she may be trying to get more democracy into this process, since the statute is not that clear.
Yeah, it is definitely kind of murky. So it'll be curious. I know the Secretary of State is weighing in on. There's a couple people at that level that have differing opinions on how the statute reads. I'm hoping that when she makes her presentation next Monday night, she discusses both opinions that have come from the Secretary of State's office, and doesn't just say, "Here's my interpretation of the statute."
Well, and sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to read from the initiative here, because this is interesting. So we have these two areas, right? We have the one with 4, that's Ward 2, I believe, and then the one with 3, which is Ward 6. And this is what it says in subsection B. If the elections administrator determines that a municipal primary election held pursuant to Montana Code, not going to read it, must be held pursuant to subsection 2A of this section, which is the section we were talking about where it says 3 times the number of electoral candidates, of this section for a local nonpartisan office, the election administrator shall conduct the election only for the local nonpartisan offices that have candidates filed in excess of 2 times the number to be elected to that office. So both 4 and 6 have it, and she's only allowed, or he's only allowed, whoever the administrator is only allowed to do it for them. But it doesn't say that they must do it, at least not in what I can read.
Yeah. So now, Harlan, let me get this straight. You would prefer not having a primary, right?
Correct.
Why is that?
Well, and I'm only going off what I've seen on the other 3 candidates' websites and looking up their Facebook pages, but the 3 of them all appear to be left of center.
Okay.
So the vote in this, it's nonpartisan, and I definitely don't self-identify as any party, but I definitely fall right of the line when it comes to fiscal matters. And so you want to pick up the mantle that Adam Hertz is leaving behind, right? Oh, very much. In fact, he's one of my neighbors. He actually recruited me to run in his place. I am very much along the same lines of Adam Hertz.
Okay. So are you sure you want the masochistic duty of being the only person on the city council to vote against stuff that the mayor wants to do?
I've told Adam many times that the 4 years he was on there, he helped fight groupthink. He may not have won as many things as he wanted or anything, but he at least put on the record an opposite view and discussed the financial impacts of the decisions that were being made. So yes, if I'm the only one, now there's 6 of them coming up, and there's some more conservative people in each of those wards. But should I be the only one that were elected? If I'm elected, I'm definitely not. It's going to be a long, hard race either way.
Yeah.
I would still be willing to spend the next 4 years at least bringing up counterpoints. That's what I do for work. I have a master's in business administration. I do feasibility studies. I do financial analysis of things. I don't put emotions into it. I just look at the dollars and cents and say, is this affordable or is this going to bankrupt us?
and to point out why, just politically, why he wants these other people in here. Imagine, for example, you're Bill Clinton, Peter. You have so many similarities to Bill Clinton.
I feel your pain. I do.
It shouldn't be that hard.
Thank you very much.
Would you rather run against just George Bush or against George Bush and Ross Perot?
I think I'd rather run against, well, never mind. I can't mention it here. A different thing.
Yeah. Not run into.
Oh,
run against.
Sorry. Yeah, I misunderstood there just a second.
That's run, not rub, by the way. Run against. But yeah, if you have the vote split on the other side,
right.
It's going to only help you. Divide and conquer.
Okay. All right. Hey, Harlan, we're way past a break, and I please keep us up to date on what happens here, and let us know what the decision. When will this decision be made? Do you know?
The city council has until Monday to make a resolution forcing a primary. So I'm hoping it'll be set up by then. But between now and the primary and/or general, trust me, I'll be calling you guys as much as I can on any issues that seem to be affecting the city.
Sounds good. And we're going to try to have all the candidates on between now and November. So,
by the way, I put that Montana code annotated, the one that's kind of confusing, up on our Facebook page if you want to read it for yourself and get a little educated on local politics.
There you go. Harlan, best of luck to you. Thanks for calling.
Thank you, sir.
Take care. All right. Put us on your speed dial. So we're going to come right back. We're way overdue for a break. We'll finally get a chance to talk with Chris. This is political science at its genesis.
Where the rubber meets the road.
Right, exactly. We're coming right back. Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Okay, let's go ahead, John.
I just want to point something out to Missoula, and something they should watch. During the election that we recently had with the mayoral election, there were four candidates in the running. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe we had a primary election. And I think it would be highly suspicious of this election committee to choose not to have a primary for the mayor and then choose to have it for a city council race. It seems like picking and choosing to me. That would be my suspicion.
We probably get. I'm happy to call Mr. Nugent, and he's a city attorney, and talk about exactly what's going on there, because he may be able to correctly interpret this statute.
He's a lawyer; he can't do that. he's the city's lawyer. He's got to interpret it for the benefit of the city.
Be that way. All right, Sue. Good morning. You're on Talkback. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had questions about the primary because I know that in the ward that the fellow that you just had on, I think there's like 4 or 5 people running in that ward, and I can't imagine.
There's 4.
4.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that they wouldn't have a primary to whittle it down to 2. But the Missoula County Democrats are going to have a candidates forum. I believe it's next Tuesday, and anyone can come and see who's running and listen to what they have to say, and I just wanted to let you guys know that.
And where is this going to be, Sue?
It's in City Council chambers.
City Council chambers, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And at what time?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. Okay.
City Council chambers seems like a fitting place for the Missoula Democrats to hold their election to me.
Well, it's to have a candidates forum.
It's a candidates forum.
It's roomy, and it's got microphones, and
it's all. Right. It smells like donkey in there.
Oh, for heaven's sake! What do you want to have at the Union Club? What's the deal?
Well, it makes sense. It's not a. It's a public. It's a public space. It's anyway. Not the Democratic headquarters.
Well, actually, you guys are always conspiracy theorists.
Well, that's why they pay us the big bucks, Sue.
That's right.
All right. Thanks for calling. All right. Bless your heart. All right. People put up with us. I can't believe they do that. But anyway, all right.
Why aren't the Missoula County nonpartisans hosting this this discussion, I wonder?
Well, it's a nonpartisan race, John. We all know it's a nonpartisan race. Even the mayor is a nonpartisan position. Right. Everybody knows that.
We have rabbit trailed dramatically from the founding of the primary system.
I know.
So I would have shifted back. I would have tossed the microphone back to our guest who was going to explain it to us. Now, we left off somewhere in 1965 with the formation of the primary system.
68.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, we can back up a little bit because prior to the 1960s, some states did have primaries, but a lot of those states that had primaries, they were sort of advisory, and the state parties actually decided what delegates they were going to send to the national convention and which candidates they were going to vote for.
So the primary is more of just a suggestion as to who we'd like to run.
I believe the term beauty pageant was used a lot. And but one of the interesting things historically, I know you guys like history, in 1960, John Kennedy was considered a long shot for the Democratic nomination.
Right.
And the party bosses, both statewide and national, said to him, you're not going to run very well in the Midwest and the South. You got to show to us that you're going to be very successful. So there's a very intense fight in the West Virginia primary between Kennedy and the other Democratic.
Was it Adlai Stevenson?
No, I don't think Stevenson was running. I can't remember the other. There was at least Humphrey may have been one of the other two people running.
I have the internet. I'll find out.
You can give us the actual answer.
West Virginia primary, 1960.
And Kennedy won.
Yeah.
And so this showed the party leaders, this guy can appeal to the blue-collar workers, the miners, the people of West Virginia, the people of Appalachia, the people of the Midwest. And they said, okay, we'll smooth your path to the nomination. Otherwise, Kennedy wouldn't have been. Similarly, in 64, Goldwater won a lot of primary contests. Again, beauty contests, didn't control any delegates. And so that helped Goldwater get the nomination.
Could you explain the whole delegate process? Because the delegates go to the national convention,
right,
cast their votes on behalf of their state.
Herbert Humphrey, by the way.
Thank you.
It was Humphrey. Okay.
Right. I could not.
Hubert. It's Hubert.
Oh, sorry.
Hubert.
Hubert.
So I could not explain the entire delegate process because it would take days, and I would have to get a law degree before I completely understood it.
Gotcha.
But as you said, the basic concept is each state party has a set of delegates who are based on nowadays how well each candidate did in the primaries in that state. And so there are going to be candidates for Marco Rubio and candidates for George Bush, delegates for Rubio and Bush coming from the different states and all the other people seeking the nomination. And they are pledged originally, most of them will be pledged to vote for one of their candidates, the candidate who won that state.
Is this like a copy paste of the electoral system?
No, this is totally different because in the Electoral College, with just a couple exceptions, Maine and Nebraska, whichever candidate wins a state, for example, Bill Clinton in 1992 with only like 38% of the vote, they get all of that state's electoral votes. In both the Democratic and the Republican Party, most of the presidential primaries are not winner-take-all. They are, to some extent, proportional. And most of them are a mix between the two. So if you're a candidate who wins a state with 40% of the vote, you get 40% of the delegates, plus you get some bonus usually for winning that state.
With 6, you get egg roll.
Exactly. It's very complicated. A lot of lawyers were involved and political scientists involved in putting this together. Very arcane system. And I can talk a little bit more after the break about why this came to be.
Right. That's right. Maybe you feel like you didn't get your stimulation from the first half hour and you need a little extra pick up and go. We have free coffee for you, and we want to give it to you.
Remember, this is not marijuana coffee.
That's right.
This is real coffee.
You are not getting 5% THC in this, or 0.5%, whatever they're putting in the brownies or the candy. This is just hardcore coffee, the stuff that gets me going every morning. You can give us a call at 721-1290. The first person to call in wins free coffee and toast from the Rocket Coffee Stand. The Rocket Coffee Stand is in the Garden City Garden Supply across from the Eastgate Shopping Center. The first caller to call 721-1290 wins the coffee.
Hey, we're back on Talkback, 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. John King's over there. I'm Peter Christian. Joining us, Chris Muste, a political science professor at the University of Montana. I'm just getting warmed up for August.
Yeah, he's got to get his football voice going.
That's right. All
right, we left off last segment talking about the delegates, and I asked you if it was similar to the Electoral College system, which, by the way, is also a complicated system.
Extremely.
But much less complicated than the delegate system.
Much less.
So when the delegates are picked out,
right.
I'm just going to go ahead, and this is what I assumed before we got in the conversation. My assumption was you get a number of delegates based on how many people are in the state. And then so for example, California has like a bajillion people, and Montana gets a half of a person that hobbles in and votes. So how does this really work?
Well, the way it really works is the national parties tell each state how many delegates they get, and that number generally is based to some extent on population, but it's also based on how many people in that state voted in that party. So, for example, I'm just guessing the population of South Carolina and Massachusetts is roughly equal. In the Republican primary, or I should say in the Republican nomination process, South Carolina will get more delegates to send to the National Convention than Massachusetts will from the perspective of the National Party. That's because South Carolina should carry more weight in the nomination process, even though the population of the states is roughly equal, because South Carolina is much more likely to deliver that state to the Republican column in November.
So do important states in the final election get more weight? For example, Florida.
Population, oh, you mean because Florida's strategically important because
Yes,
it's a swing state?
Purple states.
No.
Dang it.
No.
I thought we might have a chance to be important.
There was an effort. There was an effort by the Republican Party in Montana in
Montana has a
2008.
self-esteem problem.
We're not important.
We are important. We had like presidential contenders here in 2008. And I mean, lots of them. But also in 2008, the Republican Party wanted to speed up the system because one of the things I want to talk about is the election calendar. Mm-hmm. The first primary election is held in mid-January. The last one comes just after Montana's in mid-June. That's 6 months.
Wait, we're second to last?
I think we're second to last. Yeah. We are. The only one after us is Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're not even a state, people. They don't count.
But they do vote in the Electoral College. They have Electoral College votes.
I thought you said electrolysis, which is a whole different story. But anyway, go ahead, yeah.
But in the 2008 presidential primary, the Republican Party looked at this June Montana primary, and they said, we're not going to have any impact on the outcome. It's going to be decided before it gets to Montana. So they tried to get the state legislature to move up the primary date. The state legislature didn't. What they did instead was they tried to have a caucus where only party officials, elected officials who are members of the Republican Party, and local Republican committeemen and committeewewomen from the precinct level were able to vote in this caucus.
Kind of a rogue caucus.
Well, it hadn't been in the party rules before that, so there were a lot of people crying foul.
Yeah.
But basically they're trying to get national attention, right. And that national attention is actually one of the things that drives states to try to get earlier in that 6-month window from January to June, because they looked at things like the at the West Virginia primary in 1960, and they said, wow, look at all the media people going there. Or they began looking at the Iowa caucuses in New Hampshire, and they said, look at all the money being spent by candidates campaigns, money being spent on advertising, money being spent by media people.
Taco restaurants.
Hillary's buying all kinds of rope in Montana.
It became electoral tourism, and the states began, people in the states, business people in the states, and the states themselves began to say, if we moved our primary up, not only would we have more of a say in who gets the nomination, but we'd get more business, we'd get more essentially political tourism activity into our state. And so there's been this huge competition of states pushing to get into February, January. Some states have tried to leapfrog Iowa and New Hampshire, but there are actually laws on the books. For example, New Hampshire has a law on the book that if any state holds a primary before New Hampshire's primary automatically will take place a week before that state's.
Which we should just move it back a year. Okay, we got to go to a break. When we get back, I'd like you to explain which early states have caucuses and which ones have the voting primaries, because these are the distinction you brought up briefly, but I want you to go into depth about it because it's kind of an important distinction.
Okay, we're deep in the weeds of politics, folks. If you have a question or comment, give us a call. Or if you understand any of this, give us a call. That'd be good too. We'll be right back. Class. Good morning, class. Okay, we are talking politics here, and talking about primary politics. So go ahead.
So while Chris is explaining how the primary actually works, I would like to hear some theories or some ideas from the public of how you would like to see the primary system work, because I have a proposal of my own that I'll throw out there. I'm sure it's not new. I'm sure other people have had this one. But one of the things that, by the way, you call 721-1290 to give us your ideas on what you think would be a better system if you don't like the one, or you think it's too complicated, which it is, by the way. My question for you, Chris, at the beginning of the last or the end of the last segment was, what is the difference between like a caucus and a primary, and which states have them and why?
Okay. Primaries are what Montanans are used to. We go into the ballot booth in June or whenever the primary is being held. We get a ballot from the registrar, and we fill out the ballot and we put it in. Primary. It's an election, just like a general election. A caucus is a bunch of people getting together.
Like a smoke-filled room.
In a smoke-filled, or actually probably they're all public spaces, so it's probably illegal to smoke anything in those rooms. But the caucus is basically you have to go to the place, and I'll just describe Iowa's really briefly. One of my professors, Austin Rennie, when I was in graduate school, actually went to Iowa to participate or to observe the caucus there. And he said it was one of the most exhausting things he ever did in his life. He went around, I think, 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. There were a bunch of speeches made. There was a bunch of local party business that was done. Then the people made speeches on behalf of the candidates they supported. And then they had a first ballot where essentially they designated different parts of the room, and different people who supported one candidate went to this corner and another candidate went to that corner. And they had only a certain number of delegates to allocate. So what happened was a process where the candidate that had the fewest voters standing in their corner of the room, those voters had to go to another candidate's corner.
They had to choose.
They had to choose some other candidate that wasn't their ideal candidate.
Now they weren't assigned. They had to choose which one was the I guess the next best thing.
Exactly, their second favorite candidate.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's really so. It's really physical. Like you watch it unfold.
It is in the case of Iowa.
It's like kindergarten.
And Ron Paul, you go around the corner.
It's like choosing side. Well, it's not because they're making their own decisions about who they want to support.
It's for kickball, right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And so, but Professor Randy described this process as going on for 3.5 or 4 hours. So you've got to be a really dedicated partisan for your party to sit through this. You've got to really want your candidate to win, to stand in that corner for however long it is. And then that precinct's results get aggregated with the district's results, and then there's a complicated formula for deciding the actual delegates from that state.
So it's good to have young delegates.
It's good to have young, vigorous, well-fed.
Can they eat? Is there like a no bathroom break policy? Is it like an Ironman challenge?
No, I'm sure that's much more civilized.
It's not filibuster.
Don't pee for Hillary. Sure, there's a shirt out there.
Now there's a campaign slogan. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So a caucus voter has to be a much more dedicated voter. And the reasons that some states have caucuses is that the party organizations want to have more control over the nomination process. They don't want, Joe Blow coming in off the street who hasn't paid much attention, who doesn't really think of himself as a party loyalist. They don't want this guy coming in and influencing the primary outcomes. So a caucus is one way to make sure that only people who are super motivated and super dedicated participate in selecting your delegates.
So my question for you is this. I think that these speeches before the primary caucuses would be some of the most fascinating insights into the political system.
Yep.
Are they available to those on the outside? Because my guess is that these speeches
they would be unvarnished.
Well, these are speeches to loyalists. You don't have to pander. You don't have to speak in generalities. You can be direct and say she's going to win or he's going to win for this reason, and this is why you should vote for him. We want to get this goal achieved, and this is how they're going to do it. And that sounds really meaty to me.
So I think there are a couple of first-person accounts by political scientists and journalists who've attended those processes. I don't think they were quite as fascinated by the speeches as you were, but I think there is probably some, if not verbatim, some pretty rich accounts of those things going on. I'll look those up for you.
Well, we have a phone call. Marilyn, you're on with Professor Chris Muste. Hi.
Hi. I moved here from Washington State about 25 years ago, and I was a precinct person back there for years, and I had caucus in my home, and depending on your precinct, you had it at a school or your home or wherever, and the size of your precinct or whatever. And anyways, it was such a better effort to get the grassroots involved. And at that time, we took over the conservatives, the real conservatives, took over the Republican Party in Washington State. And so the Republicans at the higher level, the rhinos, I should say, changed the rules and made it into a primary state, because then the people at the top, the rhinos that were more entrenched, they proceeded after that. When they changed it from a caucus to a primary state, they were in charge, and the grassroots were lesser able to be involved at that point. But at the caucus, we were able to make resolutions and
So it was much more grassroots.
All
It
those
was much
people
more
were trotting on the
grassroots,
grassroots.
yeah. And so they changed the rules, and that was really a bummer.
Well, thanks for your insight.
Thank you, Marilyn. Appreciate you sharing that. We have a 1-minute break. We'll come right back at 721-1290. Now, if you belong to the Whig Party, you could be a wino.
A wino.
You could be a Whig in name only.
I think that's what they probably called them. They drank a lot back then.
Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. John King is here with us. He's on the phone right now with the Missoula Police regarding the woman who went missing in the Clark Fork River earlier this morning. But Professor Chris Muste joining us here in studio. And now, as far as what Marilyn said,
yes,
is that simply an effort of powerful people taking control over a grassroots system in order to eliminate any sort of surprises?
Well, Marilyn was referring to the difference between what she called real conservatives and rhino or Republican and name-only conservatives.
Right.
And so my guess is, and I don't know the specifics of the Washington case, but often what has happened in different states is the party leaders are concerned that if the people who are nominated in a caucus system are so conservative on the Republican side or so liberal on the Democratic side that they don't appeal to the broader electorate in a general election, that they're going to lose general elections time after time after time. And so many states, with the support of both the Republican and Democratic parties, actually have changed their nomination systems several times in different directions over the course of the last 30 or 40 years.
So which caucus states do you see that most evident in?
Changing?
No, where they have a caucus that gets someone that's just too far off the spectrum for the mass populace.
Well, a couple of political scientists have written about how in Iowa, the people who emerge, there used to be, when I was a graduate student way back in the dark ages, there was this assumption that people who came out of Iowa, the candidate who won Iowa was a sure shot to get the nomination. But a couple of political scientists looked at the data and they said, well, actually, this doesn't seem to be true. Why is this not necessarily the case? And one of the reasons that they came up with was that the people who are willing to sit through those caucuses on the Democratic side are much more liberal and on the Republican side are much more conservative. So in 2012, Rick Santorum is an extremely strong candidate in Iowa. He flops in New Hampshire. He doesn't even do that well in South Carolina. And so if you'd just gone on the basis of the Iowa Republican caucus, you would have thought that Santorum was going to, probably challenge for the nomination or perhaps win. And so some political scientists said, look, the caucuses do tend to pick candidates or delegates who are more polarized to the ends of the political spectrum for both parties.
I have a question from our guest yesterday, Rob Nadelson, a constitutional scholar. And he wanted to ask you about the constitutional implications of Montana's primary system. So Montana has an open primary system. I traditionally do not vote on the Democratic ballot, for example, but last election cycle I did because I had more options and I thought the people that were going to win on my ballot that I wanted to win were going to win anyway. Right. So I flopped. I changed ballots, which was fine for me. I didn't break any rules.
Perfectly legal.
Right.
But a lot of people think that it's breaking the Constitution's rule, the Constitution's permission for freedom of assembly. And that if you don't allow the parties to pick and choose their members, then you don't allow the parties to have an assembly. You're prohibiting from fulfilling that constitutional right. What do you think?
Well, first, speaking first to the absurdity of a constitutional scholar of Professor Nadelson's status, who used to be on the faculty here at the UM Law School, asking a political scientist what I think about a constitutional issue. I will defer to Professor Nadelson in terms of the constitutional implications.
He gets weird questions too.
I'm sure. But frankly, I understand that what's at issue in these cases that have been brought, and Idaho brought a case. There was actually a case in Washington. This was started in 2000 in a case actually that originated in California, was the parties were saying, well, that state laws that require open primaries, or in the case of California, a blanket primary, or in the case of Washington, a nonpartisan primary, that these inhibit our First Amendment right to association. And so there have been a series of court cases where the courts have been looking at our party's associational rights, that is their right to associate with people whom they want to associate with. Are these infringed by state rules that require that they have an open primary in choosing their own nominee? And so that's really the rub of these cases, is trying to figure out, the court's trying to figure out, well, is a party's associational right really harmed, or is there some other reason that states have these that is constitutionally protected? What about the rights of voters?
Allow me to ask you this.
Yeah.
Since you're a political scientist, you're well aware of what's happening in America. Is there a country that has a better, quicker, more economic, or if you will, as far as effort goes, system to get people into office without all this wading through the weeds and stuff?
Well, better depends on what your definition of better is, but simpler and more efficient,
Yeah. absolutely.
Yeah. So if we wanted
Probably
to,
everyone.
if we wanted to turn the clock back 250 years, the British, the United States used to be part of Britain. The British have a very simple system. The party leaders choose who the nominees are, and that means if you want to run for parliament in Britain, you don't just put your name forward. You take your name to the party leaders and ask their permission, and they will check out who you are if you've worked at the party before.
It's like becoming a Mason.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big membership thing. It's who's they want to know
It's a
who's loyal to the
popularity
party
contest.
and who's going to win that party seat.
Right.
And then for the British general, so that's their primaries. For the general election, the prime minister calls an election, and 5 weeks after that, I believe it's 5 weeks is still the rule. 5 weeks after that, the election is held. So there's none of this, people like us sitting around 16 months before before the general election is going to be held, talking about the primaries that are going to start in 6 months. The parties know who their nominees are because they choose them. The leaders of the parties choose them, and once that the ball drops on the start of the election cycle, the general election, the election is going to happen in 5 weeks, and that's all the time the parties have to campaign. So short and sweet.
My short and sweet solution is to have the states vote by population, ascending in population. So it's a climax sort of occasion, and everyone's engaged in the process up to the end unless there's a sure winner.
Similar to Thomas Patterson's suggestion, which was that you have one primary every month, starting with the smallest states in January or February, and then larger group of states, and then the biggest states weigh in at the very end.
Genius guy, Patterson. I don't know who he is, but yeah.
Okay. Now, we have about a minute left here. So if folks want to find out more about all this, aside from enrolling and taking your class, I mean, is there a blog or is there a website where we can learn about what you guys are studying and working on?
There are a number of political science elections websites. I don't know of any specific to primary elections. I can get back to you on that. I will say, shameless plug, I worked as the senior polling analyst for the Washington Post in 2004. And some of my friends who are political scientists started a blog called The Monkey Cage. And about 2 years ago, the Washington Post brought The Monkey Cage onto its website. And so if you go to the Washington Post, the Monkey Cage blog is a place to find out what political scientists are working on that relates to current issues in American politics.
We are out of time. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And so what's coming up on tomorrow's fabulous program?
Farmer Dan Kidd from Montana is one of the few people that have looked at the trade negotiation deals going on. He'll be on to tell us what's in there tomorrow.
And why so many people that you would think would be opposed to it are in favor of it.
For example, John Tester.
And I believe Ryan Zinke as well. So I believe. So,
He changed.
Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.